Myself, Dr. G. Suhasini, Assistant Professor of Zoology, Pingle Government College for Women, Warangal, Telangana. Talk of the day. Before going to the talk of the day, we would like to highlight some of the important points regarding the talk. Ecologically, vertebrates are the most successful animals which are habituated to live in different environments. The vertebrates are the most conspicuous group of animals of their large size and important role in their ecosystem. From a biological point of view, the chordates are interesting because they show broad biological principles of evolution, development, and relationship among other group of animals. The important fundamental chordata characters in vertebrates are presence of notochord, presence of hollow tubular nerve cord, presence of pharyngeal gill slits. These distinct characters made the chordates differentiate themselves from the other group of animals in animal kingdom. Coming to the talk, introduction to nervous system and classification of nervous system, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and third one, autonomous nervous system. Central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system includes cranial nerves, spinal nerves. Autonomous nervous system, sense organs, olfactory organs, eyes, statoacoustic organs, neuromast organs, ampullae. Coming to the history of the nervous system, nervous tissue first arose in worm-like organisms about 550 to 600 million years ago. Insonia costa, an ericardian organism, displays the characteristic quilted appearance of Ericardia enigmata. In vertebrates, the first sign of the nervous system is the appearance of thin strip of cells. Thin strip of cells among the center of the back called the neural plate. Center of the back called the neural plate. The inner portion of the neural plate along the midline is destined to become the central nervous system. Destined to become the central nervous system. The outer portion of the peripheral is the peripheral nervous system. The internal is the central nervous system and the outside is the peripheral nervous system. Development proceeds. A fold called neural groove appears along the midline. A neural groove appears along the midline as the development proceeds. This fold deepens and then closes up at the top. Closes at the top. At this point, the future central nervous system appears as a cylindrical structure called neural tube. neural tube. The sequence stage from neural plate to neural tube and neural crest is known as neuralization. Central nervous system constitutes brain. Brain is divided into three parts: forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain. Forebrain constitutes cerebrum, olfactory lobes, diencephalon, and hindbrain constitutes cerebellum, medulla oblongata. In the nervous system, in an organism, control center for sensory information from outside and inside the body and control all behaviors. Nervous system throughout the animal kingdom vary in structure and complexity. One interesting difference between the nervous system of invertebrates and vertebrates is that the nerve cord of many invertebrates are located ventrally along the belly, whereas the vertebrate spinal cord are located dorsally along the back. Compared to invertebrates, vertebrates' nervous system are more complex, centralized, and specialized. While there is a great diversity among different vertebrate nervous systems, they all share a basic structure: the central nervous system that contains a brain and spinal cord. The peripheral, made up of peripheral sensory and motor nerves. Even fundamental functions like breathing and regulation of body temperature are controlled by nervous system. Now you can see here the brain structures. The brain is divided into forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. The forebrain comprises cerebrum, which is rectangular in structure, and olfactory lobes. A pair of olfactory lobes are present, and these olfactory lobes, they are connected with the cerebrum with the help of a stalk-like structure known as olfactory peduncle. And these olfactory lobes have a sac-like structure over it known as olfactory sacs. Below the cerebrum, you have a pair of optic lobes. In between the cerebrum, you have a pineal stalk is present. And just beneath the you have medulla oblongata, and above the optic lobes you have cerebellum. Cerebellum, which is folded, has n number of folds, and below this you have the medulla oblongata, and this is the dorsal view. Coming to the ventral view, you have the optic lobes, peduncle connected to the cerebrum, and then below the cerebrum, in the center of the cerebrum, you have optic nerves, and below this, a pair of a pear-shaped infundibulum is present, and below this infundibulum, hypophysis is present, and on either sides of the infundibulum, you can see lobi inferior, and just below this cerebellum, you have the medulla oblongata, which is supplied with many cranial nerves. 6th cranial nerve and 10th cranial nerve. Here 8th, 7th, 6th cranial nerves. And in the during the formation of this brain, there are some gaps are present inside the brain. They are known as ventricles. Here in the optic lobes, a pair of rhinocele is present, and this rhinocele enters into a Y-shaped foramen of Monro. On the right side, it is known as lateral ventricle, and this foramen of Monro passes into the optocele. In between these two, a diocele is present, and this optocele enters into the epicele. In between the opto and epicele is iter, and this epicele enters into the metacele, which is present in the medulla oblongata. And there are commissures in the brain. The right and left side of the brain are connected by transverse bands of the nerve fibers. They are known as commissures. Anterior commissures in the lamina terminalis, dorsal or habular commissure in front of the pineal stalk, and posterior commissure at the dorsal junction of the diencephalon with the midbrain. And the ventricles, the olfactory in the olfactory sacs you have rhinocele. In the cerebrum you have paracele or the ventral lateral ventricles. First and second one, diencephalon, you have diocele and ventral. Third ventricle, optic lobe, you have optocele, cerebellum, epicele, medulla oblongata, metacele, or sixth, fourth ventricle. Ventricles of the brain, which we have already seen. The medulla controls the respiration, and the midbrain considers this center of coordination. Center of coordination. Spinal cord and the hindbrain controls swimming, and the ventricles of the brain the spinal cord in the Scoliodon shows definite advancement towards the plan of higher vertebrates. The grey matter is arranged in the dorsal and ventral horns. The dorsal horns are united to form a single broad region. As a result, the grey matter assumes a shape of an inverted T. Peripheral nervous system. It includes cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The cranial nerves are 10 pairs of nerves. And here, the nervous system is involved in receiving information about the environment around us and generating response to the information, motor response. The nervous system can be divided into regions that are responsible for sensation, sensory function, and the response is known as motor function. The nervous system is a highly complex part of an animal that coordinates its action and sensory information by transmitting signals to and from different parts of the body. The nervous system detects environmental changes that impact the body, then work in tandem with the endocrine system to respond to such events. Never the transmit signals from the brain are called motor or efferent nerves, while those nerves that transmit information from the body to the central nervous system are called sensory or afferent. Spinal nerves serve both functions and are called mixed nerves. The peripheral nervous system consists mainly nerves which are closed bundles of long fibers or axons that connect central nervous system to every other part of the body. Peripheral nervous system includes 10 pairs of nerves. The first pair, olfactory nerves, originates from the olfactory lobe and innervate the olfactory sacs. These nerves supply nerves to nasal septum and external nostrils. They are sensory in nature. The second is the optic nerve, which after the origin from optic thalami form the optic chiasma and supplies to eyes, which is sensory in nature. The third cranial nerve, oculomotor, which originates from the ventral surface of the mesencephalon and supplies anterior, superior and inferior recti and the inferior oblique muscles of each eyeball, which is motor in nature. The fourth, trochanter, which arises from dorsolateral surface of the midbrain and supplies the superior oblique eye muscles, which is mixed in nature. Fifth, the trigeminal, which has three branches, ophthalmic, profundus, which supplies nerves to skin and snout. Second one, ophthalmus superficialis. Fifth one, supplies nerves to skin of upper jaw. Third one, the mandibularis, innervating the muscles of lower jaw, and the another nerve, ophthalmicus profundus, becomes secondarily associated with the trigeminal to supply nerves to the eyeball and the dorsal surface of the snout. The sixth cranial nerve is abducens, which supplies the posterior rectus muscles of the eyeball, which is mixed in nature. Seventh cranial nerve is known as facial, which is divided into two branches, vestibular and saccular, which distributes nerves to membranous labyrinth of the internal ear and which is sensory in nature. And the eighth cranial nerve is called auditory, which gives the vestibular and saccular branch to the internal ear. The ninth cranial nerve is glossopharyngeal, which in the region of the first gill cleft divides into a small pre-traumatic nerve and a large post-traumatic nerve. These nerves supply branches to the pharynx, the pharyngeal muscles and the mucous membrane surrounding the first gill slit. 10th vagus nerve, which arises from the multiple roots and gives off branches, are the brachial nerves supplying to the gills, lateralis supplies to the lateral line sense organs and gives numerous branches along its course. And you can see the nerves that are present in the cranial nerves that are present in the Scoliodon. Spinal nerves arises from the spinal cord. Each has one dorsal and one ventral root. The dorsal root bears a ganglionic swelling. After emerging out of the vertebral column, the dorsal and the ventral root unite to form a common mixed nerve. Each spinal nerve gives three branches such as ramus dorsalis, ramus ventralis and ramus communicus to join with the autonomous nervous system. Autonomous nervous system. This system is made up of series of paired ganglion arranged irregularly on the dorsal wall of the kidney and the posterior cardinal sinus. The gastric ganglion is the largest ganglion and sends nerves to viscera. There is usually one ganglion in each segment. In Scoliodon, the successive ganglions are not distinct, contain chain. Sense organs. The nervous system is associated with highly developed sense organs which include apparent olfactory, optic or photoreceptor, stato, autocastic organs. The lateral line organs are neuromass and the ampulla of Lorenzi. There are olfactory organs. There are two blind sacs like olfactory organs situated in front of the mouth. Olfactory sacs are located in cartilaginous capsule and the mucous membrane is thrown into two series of folds called Schelendrian folds which are placed by the median raphe. Eyes. The eyes are built in principle of photographic camera. The eyeballs is composed of three layers, the sclera, cornea and retina. The sclera is cartilaginous. The pupil is vertical slit and it cannot be dilated or contract. The retinal layer consists of rods and cones. A large number of guanine plates are present on the inner surface of the choroid layer which is called tapetum lucidum. It acts as reflectors. The crystalline lens is spherical. The lens is kept in position by suspensor ligaments which extend from the margins of the eye to the ciliary process. The ciliary process of the longitudinal fold of the choroid layer. The eye is kept in the position in the orbit by 6 extrinsic eye muscles. Besides, the eye muscles are an optic nerve and cartilaginous optic peduncle. You can see the diagram of eye. Here, eyeball. You can see sclerotic coat and the pupil, and this is the cornea, and it is supported by anterior rectus muscle, posterior rectus muscle, anterior rectus muscle, inferior rectus muscle, and this is the superior oblique muscle, very strong. And here you have a optic nerve, and this eyeball is supported by anterior rectus muscle, the internal ear or membranous labrinum. The internal ear of each side is closed ectodermal sac. The membranous labyrinth, which is enclosed within the cartilaginous auditory capsule, one on either posterior lateral side of cranium. It consists of two parts, central otosacus and three peripheral semilunar walls. It consists of three semilunar canals and a central body differentiated into an anterior utriculus and ventral sacculus. Next is the neuromast organ. Consists of lateral lines, receptors and pit organ. The pit organ are rheoreceptors found scattered on the dorsal and lateral surface of the head. It consists the cells of the sensory hair supported to the ectodermal cells, which innervated by nerve fiber of seventh cranial nerve. They are scattered and neuromast found in all fishes. Here we can see the three semilunar walls. They are arranged in three planes of the body and open into the central body by both the ends. But one end of each canal dilates to form the ampulla. Here you can see the ampulla. 1, 2, 3, and here also one ampulla is present. And the utriculus gives off an invagination called recess utriculi beneath the ampulla. Ampulla of the anterior vertical and horizontal semilunar canals. And here this is the recess utriculi beneath the ampulla. The sacculus gives a posterior outgrowth called the laguna. This is the outgrowth called the laguna. The membranous labyrinth is placed in a cartilaginous auditory capsule. The inner cavity is filled with a fluid called the endolymph. This is filled with the endolymph, into which many calcareous bodies, otoliths, are present. The space between the membranous labyrinth and the auditory capsule is filled with perilymph. A long tube called endolymphatic duct communicates the cavity of sacculus to the exterior through a small opening. The membranous labyrinth of Scoliodon performs three functions. It helps in orientation in relating to gravity. It accelerates in changing the direction during swimming and help in hearing. The utriculus together with the semilunar canals is responsible for the orientation and acceleration, while the sacculus is meant for hearing. The internal ear or statoacoustic organs in Scoliodon. Neuromast organs. These are organs comprised of lateral lines, the lateral line, receptors and pit organs. The lateral line sense organ lies inside the lateral line canal. The lateral line sense organs lies inside the lateral line canal. These sense organs are epidermal derivatives and are called neuromass. These are called the neuromass. These are the cells, the red one with a bubble is known as neuromass, which remain embedded in the inside the wall and the lateral canals. This canal communicates to the exterior by a minute pore. This canal communicates to the exterior by a small pore known as lateral line pore. The pit organs occurs on the lateral and dorsal side of the head. Lateral and dorsal side of the head. They are actually ectodermal pits connected by group of sense cells. The neuromass organ helps in orient the body in relation to current and waves and are designated as rheoreceptors. And this lateral line has a capsule and a tuft of sensory cells, and a tuft of sensory nerves are present in it. Ampullae or Lorenzi. Innumerable pores on the dorsal and ventral side of the head lead into a long tube which terminates into radially arranged ampullary sac. The ampullae lie in clusters and each of these constitute of 8 or 9 chambers arranged radially around a central core called centrum. Two types of cells are encountered in the ampullae, glandular cells and sensory cells. The ampullae get the name according to their location. These sense organs are the thermoreceptors and are also the pressure receptors. We can see here the dissected brain of the Scoliodon. Optic lobes, olfactory lobes, cerebellum, and this is the medulla oblongata. And these are the webinar ossicles you can see. Coming to the question round. How many cranial nerves are present? Brain is divided into how many parts? Where is tapetum lucidum present? What are the neuromass sense organs? Which sense organ is thermoreceptor? Thank you.